Greetings, my dear viewer. You're on the channel The Price of Cheating. The channel is for those who appreciate traditional family values and condemn adultery. So be sure to subscribe to the channel. Let's get started. The words hit me like an unexpected punch. Honey, we need to talk. How many men have been ambushed by that phrase? How many relationships have unraveled because of it? Of course, Sophia, what's on your mind? I answered nonchalantly, not even glancing up as my wife of 14 years walked into the room. But then I saw him, a young man standing by her side. My gaze shifted sharply. "And who's this?" I asked, my tone laced with irritation. Sophia hesitated, her expression uneasy. "Brian, this is Ben. He's part of what we need to discuss." I studied the two of them, noting the stark contrast. Sophia, my stunning wife at 36, and this guy who couldn't have been older than 23. There was something off about his demeanor, a cocky air that instantly rubbed me the wrong way. While Sophia appeared earnest, Ben looked almost smug. Was that a grin on his face? A smirk? Whatever it was, it made my blood simmer. "All right, Sophia," I said, keeping my tone steady but sharp. "What exactly does this have to do with him?" She swallowed hard, clearly uncomfortable. "Brian, you've probably noticed. Things between us haven't been great lately. You know, in the bedroom." "Is that so?" I replied with mock surprise, finally meeting her gaze. "Funny, you never brought this up before." She sighed, her voice tinged with frustration. "You know what I mean. The passion. It's been missing." "Missing?" I raised an eyebrow. "Care to elaborate?" She fidgeted, avoiding my eyes. "I just feel like maybe I'm not getting everything I need from you." "Oh, really?" My voice grew colder. "And how exactly would you know that, Sophia, when you've been avoiding me for weeks?" Her cheeks reddened as her discomfort deepened. For the first time, she seemed genuinely unsettled. Before she could respond, Ben stepped forward, his presence as unwelcome as his timing. "Look, Brian, it's Mr. Anderson to you," I interrupted, my voice icy. His bravado faltered and he stepped back, visibly irritated but momentarily silenced. Sophia glanced at him nervously before turning back to me. "Brian, this is hard for me," she said softly. "I love you. I really do. I can't imagine my life without you." "But you've developed feelings for someone else," I stated flatly. "No," she said quickly, her voice rising. "Not exactly." She trailed off, looking at me with pleading eyes, hoping I'd somehow understand. I gestured for her to go on. "I'm still in love with you," she insisted, "but I've been feeling confined, like I need space to grow, to figure out who I really am." "And by figure out, you mean sleeping with Ben?" I asked bluntly. "Don't be crude," she snapped, as if I were the one crossing a line. "That's not fair." "Oh, forgive me," I said sarcastically. "What would you call it then?" "It's not just physical," she replied, as though that somehow made it acceptable. "It's about connection, growth, expanding who I am." "Ah, expanding," I said, my tone biting. "So, by expanding, you mean deepening your relationship with him while staying married to me?" "You're making this so difficult," she said with an exasperated sigh, as if I were being unreasonable. "What exactly are you asking for, Sophia?" I pressed, unwilling to let her dodge the question. She hesitated again, casting a quick glance at Ben. He gave her a subtle nudge of encouragement. Finally, she spoke. "Brian, we were thinking maybe we could stay married. Things between us wouldn't have to change, but I could also spend time with Ben, just a few nights a week." I stared at her, dumbfounded. "You actually think that's a good idea?" "Yes," she said, her voice growing firmer. "I'd always come back to you. I'd still be here for breakfast." "How considerate," I replied dryly. "With your support," she continued, her tone almost hopeful, "I could finally grow into the person I'm meant to be." "And this growth involves Ben's support as well?" I asked pointedly. Her smile faltered. Ben, on the other hand, was glaring at me, clearly holding back his anger. "Brian, please," Sophia said, stepping closer. "I know I've neglected you, but this is something I need." I raised a hand to stop her. "And you, Ben," I said, turning my attention to him. Are you all right with Sophia occasionally being intimate with me? His lips curled into a smirk. Whatever, man. Sleep with her if you want. She'll never enjoy it as much as she does with me. Sophia gasped, spinning toward him in shock. Ben, stop it! But he wasn't finished. You heard me, he sneered. She says you're fine, but I'm just better. I let his words hang in the air before speaking. Interesting, I said calmly. That's almost exactly what Linda said about you. The room fell silent. Sophia's eyes widened in disbelief, while Ben's face contorted with rage. Leave Linda out of this, he shouted, stepping toward me aggressively. Sorry, Ben, I said with mock politeness, but your wife is already involved. Ben lunged at me, his fist raised, but Sophia grabbed his arm, desperately holding him back. Don't do this, she cried. Let me go, he snarled, struggling against her grip. I'll make him pay. Ben, stop it, she pleaded, clinging to him. And there we were, frozen in a tableau of betrayal, anger, and desperation. For the first time, I felt a strange sense of clarity. Let them rage. Let them unravel. I had already decided how this chapter would close. Believe me, you don't stand a chance. Touch him, and you'll regret it. She wasn't wrong, not entirely. Sure, I had at least 15 years on him, and his gym membership clearly wasn't just for show. But I wasn't some fragile relic. I'd built a construction business from scratch, earning my stripes alongside some of the toughest men in the trade. I could hold my own. He faltered, stepping back as though weighing his options. A pity, really. Another time, perhaps. I wasn't finished yet. So, what's the deal with dragging Ben's wife into this mess? It was Sophia, my wife, who finally broke the silence. Her voice was tight with restrained emotion. Why involve her at all? She has nothing to do with this. Leave her out of it. I shrugged, keeping my tone casual. Not my doing. She contacted me a month ago, told me everything about you two. The shock on Sophia's face was almost theatrical. But Ben? He looked like someone had just kicked the foundation out from under him. Not a clue. He'd had no clue whatsoever. Honestly, it was starting to feel good watching him squirm. Score, 2-0. The room felt like a standoff, tension crackling as the three of us locked eyes. Unsurprisingly, it was Sophia who caved first. If you're wondering if I've been sleeping with her, I said, deliberately savoring every word, the answer is yes. At first, it was just payback for both of us. That started, about 4 weeks ago. But now, it's turned into something much more enjoyable. You're a liar, you piece of garbage, Ben snapped, his voice trembling with fury. There's no way my wife would cheat on me, especially not with someone like you, a washed-up has-been. I arched an eyebrow and threw a glance at Sophia, who looked visibly annoyed. We were the same age, after all. What did that say about her? Poor woman. Need proof, Ben? I asked, my tone mocking. Want me to describe her rose tattoo? I could even tell you exactly where it is. Or maybe I should reenact the way she gasps. Oh yes, oh yes, oh yes, when she reaches her peak. Ben's face flushed crimson, his rage palpable. If looks could kill, I'd have been long gone. But the truth was dawning on him. I'd not only seen his young, beautiful wife naked, but had thoroughly enjoyed it too. Liar, he hissed through gritted teeth. Linda would never do that. Not for you, she wouldn't, I fired back with a grin. But I showed her what she was missing. She's a quick learner. Maybe you should have focused on her instead of fooling around with my wife. Ben's fury boiled over. He shoved Sophia's hand off his arm and stormed toward the door. I'm going to deal with that cheating wife of mine, he roared. Not so fast, Ben, I called after him, pulling a key from my pocket. Unless you've got one of these, you're not getting into the house. I have my own damn key, he spat. Not like this one, I replied smugly. We changed the locks. His bravado deflated in an instant. Watching him crumble was immensely satisfying. Well, that's my cue, I announced cheerfully, standing up for the first time. You know where to find me if you need clarification. Wait, Brian. Sophia's voice cracked as tears welled in her eyes. You can't just walk out on me like this. Oh, but I can, I said with eerie calm. And everything I care about from this house is either at Linda's place or packed in my car. Consider it extra space for yourself, sweetheart. Sophia's eyes darted around the room, finally registering the absence of my belongings. Her tears spilled over as she rushed toward me, but I stopped her with a raised hand. Gently, I told her she could keep the house, the car, and that my lawyer would handle the rest. "But how will I survive, Brian?" she sobbed. "You've got your part-time job," I replied flatly, "and maybe Ben here can step up, though that might be tricky, seeing as Linda's father plans to fire him first thing tomorrow." I strode to the door, pausing to drink in the sight of them, broken, defeated, a stark contrast to the smug confidence they'd exuded only half an hour ago. "Goodbye, Ben," I said. "It's been enlightening." "Goodbye, Sophia. Thanks for the memories. It's been educational." Score, 3-0. Game over. Without a backward glance, I stepped into the night and headed for my car. Behind me, their shouting and accusations echoed, filling the air like a discordant symphony. All this would cost me about $100 in legal fees to untangle myself from Sophia. Small price to pay, considering it wasn't her first betrayal. I felt nothing for her anymore. Trading a 36-year-old woman, still attractive, sure, and a small payout for a 21-year-old who was wild in bed, a solid upgrade. And the fact that Linda adored me with a multimillionaire father, that was just a bonus. What a victory. What a joke. Thanks for reading. If you enjoyed this little tale, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts below. Take care. This concludes the story. If you like it, then put your powerful like and subscribe to the channel. Greetings, my dear viewer. You're on the channel The Price of Cheating. The channel is for those who appreciate traditional family values and condemn adultery. So be sure to subscribe to the channel. Let's get started. I decided to spend the morning fishing, but no sooner had I reached the car than I realized I'd forgotten part of my gear. Turning back, I walked into the house, only to hear my wife chatting with her friend. What grabbed my attention was Jasmine's voice, full of laughter as she exclaimed, "It's so long!" Her comment was followed by a burst of giggles from both women. Curious and slightly puzzled, I asked, "What's that all about?" Jasmine and Mary exchanged a glance before Jasmine brushed it off with a laugh. "Oh, Aaron, don't be ridiculous," she said. "We were talking about Freddie, the guy who just moved in down the street." Jasmine elaborated with a playful smile. "He's been growing his hair out, and now he's got this absurdly long ponytail." Mary chimed in, nodding with enthusiasm. "It's so long it almost reaches his waist. We couldn't help but laugh about it." I blinked, still confused. "A ponytail?" I repeated, trying to process what I'd heard. Sensing the awkward tension, Mary smirked and added teasingly, "Not that you'd notice, Aaron, considering you don't have much to worry about up top." Their laughter bubbled up again, and although I tried to join in with a forced chuckle, her comment stung. "Well," I retorted, forcing a grin, "losing my hair isn't a sign of laziness. It's proof that I've been using my brain too much, working hard to get ahead." That earned a few chuckles, and Jasmine shook her head, still smiling. Grabbing the gear I'd forgotten, I slung it over my shoulder and headed out. But as I drove to the lake, I couldn't shake the echo of their laughter. Something about it gnawed at me. Fishing was supposed to be my escape, a way to clear my mind. But my thoughts kept circling back to the house and that fleeting exchange. When I finally arrived, I set up my rods, chair, and a small tent by the water. The stillness of the lake should have calmed me, but instead, my mind kept replaying their conversation. The more I dwelled on Freddie, the harder it was to silence an unsettling sense of unease. I found myself comparing us. At 58, I wasn't the man I used to be, while Freddie, who couldn't be older than 33, seemed to embody youthful vitality. He looked like he'd stepped off the cover of a fitness magazine, with a physique straight out of a sculptor's dream. I scoffed inwardly. Guys like him probably spent hours in front of a mirror, obsessing over their looks. There's a word for men like that. It escaped me at the moment. If it comes to you, let me know in the comments. No time to Google. I'm too busy telling this story. Sure, Freddie looked good, but I wondered how much time he wasted on appearances. I'd spent my prime building a business from the ground up. By now, I worked just a couple of days a week and had the rest of my time to enjoy life. That was my win. Or at least I thought it was. My thoughts drifted to Jasmine. At 46, she'd aged gracefully. though there were hints of the years showing. It made me wonder if she was feeling the weight of middle age. People often start searching for excitement during this phase of life. Was Jasmine doing the same? Or was I being irrational? I sighed and tried to push the thoughts away. I hadn't come here to stew in doubts, but peace of mind was hard to find. Then about a week later, things took a surprising turn. Jasmine and Mary announced they'd signed up for yoga classes. Initially, I was glad. It's important to stay active as you age. But then, I learned who the instructor was. Freddie. Yes, the same Freddie who had already claimed too much space in my head. Jasmine and Mary had never shown much interest in yoga before, but suddenly, with Freddie leading the sessions, they were all in. Funny how motivation works, isn't it? I could understand Mary's excitement. She'd been single since her divorce 5 years ago. But Jasmine? My wife had never been one to jump on fitness trends. Why was she now so eager to spend time at the gym? My doubts flared again, this time louder. One evening, I couldn't hold back any longer. "What's with you and Mary spending so much time around Freddie?" I asked. "And what were you two laughing about the other day?" Jasmine's expression hardened. "Are you seriously jealous?" she asked, incredulous. "Is that what this is about?" I didn't deny it. "Yeah, maybe I am," I admitted. "The guy's half my age, looks like a Greek god, and now you're going to yoga classes because of him. What am I supposed to think?" She rolled her eyes, clearly exasperated. "Maybe you should take this as a sign to take better care of yourself," she said sharply. "Honestly, Aaron, you've let yourself go. You've got a belly now, and let's not even get into your other issues." Her words hit me like a punch. The comment about my weight stung, but it was her jab at my health that cut deeper. Men my age will understand. It's not just physical, it's the blow to your confidence that hurts most. I'd recently started treatment for prostate problems, and while I was improving, it was a sensitive topic. I clenched my jaw, trying to keep my anger in check. "Why would you say something like that?" I asked quietly, though the frustration boiled inside me. I never expected her words to hit me so hard. We were supposed to be a team, but instead, Jasmine had turned my insecurities into weapons against me. She simply shrugged, her casual indifference making the sting of her comment even worse. "Maybe it's time you faced reality, Aaron. Freddie isn't the problem here." "You are." Her words landed like a gut punch, not just because of their sharpness, but because they exposed a troubling shift in our dynamic. This wasn't only about Freddie anymore. Sure, I was angry, but there was something deeper, a disquiet that lingered long after the argument ended. I knew I had to dig into this Freddie situation, not just to ease my growing unease, but to figure out why Jasmine seemed so invested in him. The way she talked about him, the enthusiasm she and Mary had for his yoga classes, it all set my nerves on edge. Determined to get answers, I turned to Arthur, a business contact with a knack for uncovering hidden details. Arthur wasn't a private investigator, but he had a talent for finding information online. He'd helped me before and never failed to deliver. When I asked him to look into Freddie, he agreed without hesitation. "No problem, Aaron," he said confidently. "Give me a week. I've got a few other things on my plate, but I'll dig up what I can." Having Arthur on the case gave me some relief, but I couldn't just sit around obsessing in the meantime. I needed a distraction and a way to regain control of my own life. Around this time, my doctor had been urging me to adopt healthier habits. With Jasmine's criticisms still fresh in my mind, I felt a surge of motivation to prove something, to her and to myself. While searching for options, I stumbled across a program that intrigued me, a men's sports camp. It promised a rigorous back-to-basics approach with hiking, physical challenges, and traditional sports training designed to boost fitness and strength. It sounded perfect. A chance to reconnect with my inner resilience, to relive the thrill of pushing my limits like I did during my scouting days. But it wasn't just about getting healthy. Jasmine had thrown my physical state in my face, and this felt like an opportunity to prove her wrong, to prove to myself that I wasn't some guy who'd let himself go. Signing up felt like reclaiming my dignity. For the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of excitement. While Arthur worked on uncovering the truth about Freddie, I focused on preparing for the camp. If Jasmine wanted me to take my health seriously, fine, I'd go above and beyond. The camp began with a burst of energy, and I knew immediately that I was in the right place. Nestled in a lush forest by a lively river, the setting was invigorating. The crisp air, the stunning views, it was the perfect environment to reset. For the first time in a long while, I felt like I could breathe again. The group was a mix of men spanning different ages, from their 20s to their 70s. The older guys were particularly inspiring, vigorous and full of life, defying their years. If they could transform themselves, so could I. The challenges were demanding but thrilling, reigniting parts of me I thought had been lost. I felt alive, rediscovering a strength I hadn't tapped into in years. But just as I was fully immersing myself in the experience, my phone buzzed. It was Arthur. My heart raced as I stepped aside to take the call, bracing for whatever he had uncovered. Arthur's tone was steady, but his words carried weight. "Aaron," he began, "Freddie's legit in the fitness world, certified, well-regarded, but there's more, a lot more." I prepared myself for the worst. Arthur continued, "Turns out Freddie has an interesting past. He used to be a male stripper, and that's not all. He runs a lifestyle blog that's unconventional." "What kind of blog?" I asked, my skepticism growing. Arthur let out a dry chuckle. "Not fitness tips, if that's what you're thinking. He teaches men how to charm older women, get them to lavish you with gifts, and basically live off them. It's a guide to being a gigolo." My stomach churned. Freddie wasn't just some yoga instructor. He was running a sleazy scheme, teaching men how to manipulate women for money. And he was getting close to Jasmine and Mary? My blood boiled. Arthur wasn't done. "I've got proof. Screenshots, links, the whole package. If you need to confront Jasmine, you'll have everything you need." I thanked him, caught between outrage and vindication. My instincts about Freddie had been spot on, but the reality was worse than I'd imagined. Now, I had evidence to confront Jasmine when the time came, but for now, I needed to stay focused on the camp. I wasn't about to let Freddie's antics derail the progress I was making. The camp became my priority. I tucked my phone away and rejoined the group, more determined than ever to push myself. Whatever happened when I got back, one thing was certain. Things were going to change. When the camp ended, I returned home feeling stronger, physically and mentally, and ready to face the challenges ahead. But before confronting Jasmine, I decided to check something I'd always avoided: her spending habits. I had access to her account but had respected her privacy. Until now. Given what I'd learned about Freddie, I couldn't ignore the possibility. What I found was worse than I'd feared. Her spending had spiked dramatically, with transactions that didn't make sense. Was she giving money to Freddie? The thought alone sent a wave of anger through me. That evening, I waited at home, tension building as I prepared to confront her. When she finally walked through the door, something about her seemed different. She halted in the doorway, her body stiffening as her gaze landed on me sitting there. It was as though my presence struck her like a jolt she hadn't braced for. The surprise on her face quickly morphed into unease, a discomfort magnified by the pungent smell of alcohol lingering around her. She was drunk. My words came out harsher than intended. "Where have you been?" "Oh, Aaron. Back already, huh?" she slurred, her tone uneven as she sidestepped my question altogether. But I wasn't in the mood for games. "Where exactly have you been throwing all this money, Jasmine?" 2 weeks, and it's disappearing like sand through fingers, with nothing to show for it," I pressed. Her expression shifted, a volatile mix of indignation and surprise. "What is this?" she shot back, her voice sharpening. "Since when do you get to monitor how I spend my money? You don't control me, Aaron." I expected the defensiveness. It was classic Jasmine, but it only fueled the fire smoldering in my chest. "Control you? No, Jasmine. But when you're hemorrhaging cash, and it looks like you're being strung along by that Freddie character, yeah, I'm going to ask questions." My voice grew louder as I grabbed a stack of papers Arthur had sent me, slamming them onto the table. "Do you even know who this guy is? Let me enlighten you. He's not just some yoga instructor with a charming smile. He's a predator, a professional con artist who preys on women, draining them dry while pretending to be the victim. He doesn't just stop there, he trains others to do the same. Her eyes widened as I shoved the documents toward her. Are you seriously this naive, Jasmine? Falling for some smooth talker because he's easy on the eyes? My anger spilled over, my tone cutting. I pointed at the papers. Read it. This is who he really is. He's playing you for a fool. For a moment she said nothing, her gaze flickering between the papers and me. Denial and confusion flashed across her face before she sank onto the couch, her head shaking slowly. No, she whispered, her voice trembling. That's not true. He's not like that, Aaron. He's just a yoga instructor. I couldn't help but scoff. A yoga instructor? Sure. And a stripper. And a scam artist. He's all those things, Jasmine, and you're letting him take you for a ride. She didn't respond. She simply sat there, staring blankly at the damning evidence. Whether it was the alcohol clouding her thoughts or the weight of reality finally sinking in, I couldn't tell. For once, she wasn't yelling back. She looked lost. The silence hung heavy in the air until she finally broke it, her voice laced with bitterness. Yeah, turns out he's a real piece of work. A flicker of relief stirred in me, a hope that maybe she was beginning to see the truth. But then, almost inaudibly, she added, Good thing I broke up with him. Her words hit me like a freight train. I froze, the implications swirling in my head. Did she even realize what she'd just admitted? My voice was barely audible as I managed to say, Jasmine, are you serious? Are you out of your mind? Her head snapped up, her eyes a mix of anger and shame. So what? She yelled, her voice trembling as she threw her hands up. Yes, fine, I had an affair. Is that what you wanted me to say? I stared at her, my brain struggling to catch up. Before I could form a response, she unraveled before me, her words spilling out in a torrent of emotion. I'm a grown woman, Aaron. Do you even know what it's like to feel yourself fading? To watch your youth slip away? I don't know who I am anymore, and it terrifies me. The person standing in front of me felt like a stranger. And that's supposed to justify this? I asked, my voice trembling. The betrayal in my chest felt suffocating, as though the ground beneath me was giving way. It wasn't betrayal, she fired back, her tone sharp and defensive. I needed it, Aaron. You wouldn't understand. I'm going through a midlife crisis. Needed it? I repeated, the words tasting sour as they left my mouth. You needed to destroy us? To throw everything away? For him? Her voice turned cutting, almost cruel. Look at yourself, Aaron. You're older than me. You've got your health issues. You're dragging me down. I'm still in my prime and I needed to feel alive again. You wouldn't get it. Every word felt like a dagger, each one cutting deeper than the last. I stared at her, my mind spinning. When did you become this person? I asked quietly, disbelief weighing down every syllable. She didn't answer. Instead, she shifted the blame onto me. You don't understand women, Aaron. You have no idea what it's like to feel invisible, to lose yourself. And you've let yourself go. You don't even try anymore. I was looking at someone I no longer recognized. The woman I loved had been replaced by someone bitter and unkind. My thoughts flickered to Mary, who had dragged Jasmine into those absurd workshops and classes, filling her head with nonsense about empowerment and energy. Maybe this chaos was her doing, planting these destructive ideas and letting them grow. My thoughts churned as Jasmine, the woman I had trusted, sat there blaming me for everything. She poured herself another glass of wine, utterly indifferent to the wreckage she'd left behind. Seeing her like this, so casual in her destruction, made my anger boil over. You know, I said, my voice dripping with venom, I guess Freddie's got quite the tail to wag, doesn't he? She didn't even flinch. Instead, she laughed, a cold, bitter sound that sliced through me like a blade. And he knows how to use it better than you ever did, she sneered, her glassy eyes brimming with spite. I stood frozen in place, gripping the edge of the table so tightly that my hands ached and my knuckles turned stark white. Her words echoed relentlessly in my mind, sharp and unyielding, like the toll of a bell. For a moment, I felt my composure slipping, the storm of emotions threatening to overwhelm me, but I held firm. Somehow, I swallowed the seething anger that coursed through me like a tempest. "Jasmine!" I bellowed, my voice erupting with a force I barely recognized as my own. "You've destroyed everything we built. You betrayed me, you humiliated me, and now, instead of showing even the slightest remorse, you're still trying to drag me further down. After this, I'm done. I'm filing for divorce." Her response was cold, devoid of any trace of regret. Raising her glass in a mock salute, she smirked, the gesture laced with cruelty. "Aaron, go to hell," she hissed. "But don't forget, no matter what happens to your precious financial empire, I'll always have a share. There's nothing you can do about that." Each word cut like a blade, carving into me with precision. And the worst part? She wasn't wrong. No matter how deeply I resented her, no matter how much I wished to sever her from my life entirely, she still had a claim on what I had worked tirelessly to achieve. The bond that had once been forged through love and trust was now an unyielding chain of legal entanglements that I couldn't escape. I had trusted her, loved her, and now that trust had been turned into my downfall. But amidst the venom of her words, an unexpected clarity emerged. Watching her revel in my misery, her drunken arrogance filling the room, I realized something. I would rather relinquish part of my wealth than endure another moment of this toxic humiliation. In time, I moved forward. Jasmine and I divorced, and she walked away with her portion of the assets, enough to ensure her comfort, provided she didn't squander it on fleeting whims like Freddie, her latest infatuation. As for me, I left everything behind, the house, the city, and all the memories of our disintegrating marriage. I needed space, not just from her, but from the entire chapter of my life that she embodied. What surprised me most came after the dust began to settle. Of all people, it was Mary, one of Jasmine's so-called friends, who started creeping back into my life. At first, her overtures seemed harmless. She reached out under the guise of concern, offering words of support and sympathy. But as time passed, her true intentions became glaringly obvious. The pretense dissolved. She began flirting openly, finding reasons to meet up, her touches lingering a fraction too long, her gaze carrying an unmistakable familiarity. I was caught off guard. Mary, the same person who had fueled Jasmine's erratic behavior and played a role in so much of the chaos, was now attempting to insinuate herself into my life. It felt calculated, as if she had been lying in wait for this very moment. Perhaps she had been watching from the sidelines all along, waiting for an opportunity to strike. Or maybe she simply thrived on the chaos, eager to create more turmoil wherever she could. Whatever her motives were, I wanted no part of it. I rejected her advances at every turn, determined to stay far from the drama that had nearly destroyed me. I was done with all of it. Instead, I turned my energy toward rebuilding myself. I poured my focus into regaining my physical and mental strength, pushing myself in ways I hadn't in years. Joining a training camp marked a pivotal moment, igniting a fire within me that had long been extinguished. I found a community there, people who motivated me to grow, to strive for something greater, and to leave the wreckage of my past behind. One of my new friends at the camp suggested I take a trip. "Go somewhere like Thailand, Bali, or Zanzibar," he said. "Trust me, it'll change you. A fresh perspective, a different setting, it can work wonders." I wasn't entirely sure what he meant. Was it the allure of serene beaches, the richness of the culture, or something else? But the idea stuck with me. After everything I'd endured, I figured I deserved a change, a chance to step away from the chaos and perhaps find a new beginning. Who knew? Maybe I'd uncover incredible fishing spots in those crystal-clear waters or stumble upon something entirely unexpected. Whatever awaited me, one thing was certain. I was finished living under the shadow of my past. It was time to focus on what lay ahead, on carving out a path that was mine and mine alone. This concludes the story. If you like it, then put your powerful like and subscribe to the channel. Greetings, my dear viewer. You're on the channel The Price of Cheating. The channel is for those who appreciate traditional family values and condemn adultery. So be sure to subscribe to the channel. Let's get started. My name is Larry, and I'm 57 years old. I own a garage, not just any garage, but one I built from nothing. Every inch of it reflects my blood, sweat, and determination. My journey started when I was just 17, working my first job in auto repair. I was an apprentice back then, learning the trade under the watchful eye of my uncle. For 8 long years, I saved every dime I could manage to set aside. Finally, with enough money in hand, I opened my own shop. The first few years were grueling. I worked relentless hours, often staying late into the night just to keep the business afloat. Little by little, my persistence paid off. Decades of hard work transformed that small operation into a thriving enterprise. 30 years later, it's something I'm incredibly proud of. But was my career the only journey I'd taken? No, there was love too. Her name was Riley. We crossed paths at an auto show while she was still in college. Our conversation felt effortless, as if we'd known each other for years. Something just clicked. We traded phone numbers, promising to stay in touch. Living in separate cities didn't make it easy, so our early relationship was built on long phone calls. Months later, she visited me in person. That visit solidified our connection. It was undeniable. We had something special. Then life threw Riley a curveball. Her parents passed away unexpectedly, leaving her with no financial support to continue her education. Without a second thought, I reached into my savings and paid for her tuition. She cried, hugging me with everything she had, overwhelmed by the gesture. In that moment, I knew she was the one. 5 years later, she moved in with me. Armed with her law degree, she landed a job at a local firm. Our lives felt full. On weekends, we'd hike together, exploring nature's quiet beauty. One unforgettable Sunday, after a long trek to the top of a hill overlooking the city, Riley did something that left me speechless. She knelt down, pulled out a ring, and asked me to marry her. I'm not often at a loss for words, but that moment caught me off guard. Of course, I said yes. She slipped the ring onto my finger, grinned, and declared, "From now on, you're mine forever." 3 weeks later, we were married in a small, intimate ceremony. Our life together was filled with joy. We had 2 children, Maria, now 19, and James, who's 18. Maria's in college, and James is chasing his passion as the lead guitarist for a local rock band. With the kids growing older and starting their own lives, I found peace. I'd built a successful business, raised 2 amazing children, and supported my wife as she pursued her dreams. I'd never been to college myself, and people sometimes saw me as a rough, unpolished man. But I'd never cared what people thought. I knew who I was. Then everything changed. After 20 years of marriage, I knew Riley's habits better than anyone. I'd seen her at her best and her worst, and I'd learned to recognize when something wasn't right. When she took a new job at a prestigious law firm, I noticed the shift. Late nights at the office became more frequent. Her confidence grew, not in a way that I'd seen before. This was different. It came with an air of entitlement. Then there was her boss, a flashy lawyer known for his big wins in court. From the first moment she mentioned him, I had a bad feeling. I'm a patient man, but patience has its limits. For 3 months, I observed. I listened. I put the pieces together. Her overtime excuses didn't hold up. I'd had enough. One night I confronted her. I'm not a man who raises his voice easily, but that night was different. Riley had never seen me like that before. It took less than 20 minutes before she broke down and admitted everything. Yes, she'd been sleeping with her boss. I'd braced myself for that possibility, but no amount of preparation can make it hurt less. I asked her one thing. Why? Her answer was sharp and heartless. You're the same man you've always been, Larry. You never changed, never grew. You're still wearing the same old clothes and running that garage like it's your entire identity. I want more. I want to be with someone who commands respect at parties, someone people admire. You're not that man. Her words hit harder than any punch. I'd sacrificed so much for her, paid for her education, helped raise our kids, and gave her a loving, stable home. I'd always believed love was about loyalty and partnership, not power and status. So you're throwing away 25 years together because I'm not some arrogant show-off? I asked. That's your reason? Her face hardened. Face reality, Larry. I'm going to be with Robert. You'll have to accept it. If you fight me, I'll destroy you. I'll divorce you, drain you dry, and take everything, even that garage you're so proud of." I stayed quiet for a moment, watching her, not with anger, but with clarity. I'd never seen her more clearly than I did right then. Slowly, I smiled. It wasn't forced or bitter. It was calm, knowing. "You're welcome to try," I said softly. She opened her mouth to reply, but I didn't give her the chance. I stood, walked away, and left her there. The next morning, I went to work as usual. I didn't say a word to her on my way out. As soon as I'd left, she called him. "Hey, Robert," she said, her voice unsteady. "We've got a problem." "What happened?" he asked, his tone sharp with concern. "Larry knows. I told him everything," she admitted. There was a pause. "Damn, that's going to complicate things," Robert muttered. "But it's not the end. We've talked about this, remember?" "I know," she sighed. "But it's different now. Talking about it was easy. Facing him was something else. We've been together for 25 years. We have 2 kids. "And what did you say to him?" Robert asked. "Exactly what we agreed on," she replied. "I told him the truth, that I'm ambitious and he's just a mechanic stuck in the past. I'm looking for someone who matches my ambition." "Good," Robert said. "Stick with that. We'll make sure he's got no way out." But they'd underestimated me. People have always mistaken patience for weakness. They're about to learn how wrong they are. I'm looking for a partner who's my equal, a man with the strength to lead, not just someone who bends to my every whim. That's the plain truth of it. But I'm not here to vilify him. He's a self-made man, someone who built his business from scratch. It's that very business that kept a roof over our heads, paid for the kids' education, and even supported me when I decided to return to school. Still, when we rehearsed what I'd say, it felt like I had every right to want someone like you. But then he reminded me of everything he'd done, his emotional support, his financial sacrifices, and suddenly, my reasoning didn't sound as convincing. "Do you see where I'm coming from? Did you tell him everything?" "Yes," I told him, Robert. "I told him that if he didn't cooperate, the firm would back me to the end in the divorce and leave him with nothing. But here's the thing, he didn't even flinch. None of it seemed to faze him. He just kept saying he couldn't believe I'd throw him aside after all he'd done for me. And I'll be honest, Robert, that hurt. I tried to make him understand that it wasn't about discarding him. It was about wanting more for myself. But I'm not sure he believed me. I don't want to lose him, Robert." "More for yourself, huh? Riley, that's a slap in the face," Robert said. "You're the one who said you loved my size," he added. "You're the one who told me I'd taken you places your husband hadn't in years. Didn't you say you'd never experienced anything like this before?" "Yes, I did," I admitted. "But I also told you that Larry's the only other man I'd ever been with. He's always been gentle with me." "Gentle," Robert sneered. "And I'm not, huh? I'm the one who's rough, commanding, and you love every second of it." "Yes," I whispered. "Then get used to it," he declared. "Because I'm not going anywhere. Your husband's just going to have to accept that he's not in charge anymore. I am. I'm the alpha now, and that's not changing. Still," he added, "I'd hate to think I'd ruined your marriage after 25 years. Here's an idea. I'll draft some paperwork and pay him a visit this afternoon. Just leave me the address to his workshop." "What paperwork?" I asked. "Oh, you know the usual," Robert said with a grin. "Restraining orders to keep him away from you, me, and your house. Orders to freeze his business accounts until a settlement's reached. I'll drown him in so much legal red tape he'll be begging for a lifeline. It's the same playbook we use on every poor fool who's too blind to see it coming." "That's cruel," I muttered. "Cruel?" Robert's eyebrow lifted. "He'll be lucky to walk away with the clothes on his back. By the time I'm done, he'll be crawling to you for scraps. Welcome to reality, darling." "I'm not sure you saw his face this morning," I replied. Later that day, around 2 p.m., Robert arrived at Larry's garage. "Mr. Garcia, mind if I step in?" Robert's voice was firm and confident. "I know who you are," Larry said, his gaze like cold steel. "Good," Robert replied, walking inside. "Then we can skip the introductions. Let's get straight to it. Riley's already told you she's not changing course with me." but she didn't tell you why you're going to accept it. He set his briefcase on a nearby workbench and snapped it open. You're looking at the owner of the company your wife works for. I've got over 20 lawyers on my payroll, each one a predator. Half of them are divorce specialists. See these? He fanned out several documents like playing cards. This one's a signed divorce petition. This one's an order to freeze your business accounts. Here's an eviction notice giving you 24 hours to leave your home. And these? Restraining orders. You're to stay at least 200 meters away from me, Riley, her house, and my office. Getting the picture, Larry? By the time I'm done, you'll be so tangled in legal knots you won't know which way's up. You'll be too broke to afford a half-rate lawyer. And while you're drowning, I'll still be in your wife's bed. Robert's eyes scanned Larry from head to toe. Sure, you're bigger than me, stronger too. But muscle doesn't run the world anymore. Brains do. So here's how it's going to work. I'll keep seeing Riley whenever I please, and you'll get to see her when she's in the mood. That's how it's been for the last 4 months, so why change it now? Eventually, I'll get bored, and she'll be yours again. He leaned in close, his grin dripping with smugness. Face it, if you'd been enough for her, we wouldn't be here. Take the hit, Larry. Use it as fuel to improve yourself. Here's some free advice, Robert added. Women want a man who's in control. I didn't win Riley over with charm. I won by taking charge. Just like I'm doing with you. Larry's eyes darkened like a gathering storm. His patience had run out. You done? He asked, his voice unsettlingly calm. You're like every fool who's misunderstood what it means to be an alpha. You want me to explain it? He cracked his knuckles, and for the first time, Robert's smirk faltered. They say actions speak louder than words. With that idea firmly in mind, I took a deliberate step forward and sent a sharp right hook crashing into the lawyer's face. The strike landed with the crisp snap of bone giving way and the jarring clatter of teeth loosening from their sockets. Robert stumbled back, hitting the workshop wall with a thud, his wide-eyed shock mixing with the contorted grimace of pain on one side of his face. The other side was already beginning to swell, puffing up like rising dough. Consider that your first piece of evidence. Before Robert could fully process what was happening, I grabbed him by the collar and hauled him to his feet. But standing wasn't in the plan. My next punch was a brutal uppercut that drove deep into his diaphragm. The air shot out of him in a sharp wheeze, and he folded over, collapsing to the floor and curling into himself like a newborn. Exhibit number 2, for those keeping track. As he lay there, desperate for breath, I raised my steel-toed boot and brought it down hard on his outstretched hand. The snap of bones fracturing was clean and unmistakable. His wrist twisted grotesquely, his fingers bent in unnatural angles like a broken marionette's hand. Another sharp kick to his ribs echoed in the workshop, followed by the hollow crack of bone. That's Exhibit 3, and 4 if you're counting. I'm a patient man. Or at least I'd like to think so, but even patience has a limit. Stop whining, I said, my voice calm but firm. I'm trying to teach you something important here. I nudged him with the toe of my boot, making sure he was paying attention. Congratulations, Robert. You've just made me break a promise I've kept since high school. I'd sworn never to use my strength against anyone unless it was absolutely necessary. I crouched next to him, my tone as steady as if I were explaining a simple math problem. But look at us now. I was going to let you walk away from all of this. Riley's mess was hers to clean up, not mine. But you? You couldn't help yourself. Had to march in here like you owned the place, acting like you're untouchable. Well, every man's got a breaking point. I pressed the sole of my boot gently but unmistakably against his throat, just enough to remind him that control had slipped from his hands. Since you're so obsessed with this alpha nonsense, let's have a little lesson on the subject. You've got it all wrong, I said, watching him squirm. In a wolf pack, the alpha isn't necessarily the biggest or even the smartest. He's the one who's willing to do what others won't. No hesitation, no mercy. That's what it means to be an alpha. And you? I snorted, shaking my head. You're none of that. In your office, sure, you're king of the cubicles. But out here? Out here, you're just another bug waiting to be crushed. I knelt down so we were eye to eye, letting him see the certainty in mine. You think you're clever, But if you had any sense at all, you'd have brought backup. No witnesses, no support. You're as dumb as they come. Standing up, I leaned back against the wall, letting the silence stretch. All right, Robert, let's review your options. I raised a hand, counting them off on my fingers. Option 1, you call the cops. Maybe they arrest me. Maybe they don't. Maybe I'm charged. Maybe I'm not. Worst case for me, I'm locked up for a few years. And guess what happens in there? I'll learn. Learn to be even more dangerous. Learn to disappear a body if I need to. So when I'm back out, we'll have this same conversation, only you'll be dealing with a much more experienced version of me. I paused, letting him absorb that reality before I continued. Option 2, you count your losses. Chalk this up as a life lesson. I'm sure you've heard of cause and effect, counselor. Sleep with a man's wife, and sometimes that man isn't too happy about it. So take your alpha nonsense, drag yourself out of my shop and don't come back. You've already cost me a night's worth of cleanup. I glanced down at the blood-streaked floor. Look at this mess. Blood's a pain to get out of concrete. Later that evening, Riley's worried voice came through Robert's phone. Robert, where are you? I've been waiting at the office. You're hours late. Robert's voice was hoarse and strained. Hospital, he muttered. 3 hours in the ER before they finally admitted me. What happened? She gasped. Did you crash your car? No, he replied with a bitter groan. Your husband happened. I thought I could handle him. Idiot move. He broke my nose, my hand, 3 ribs, and maybe my cheekbone too. That's not possible, Riley stammered. Larry's never hurt anyone in his life. Believe it, Robert muttered. I've got the X-rays to prove it. This isn't real, she said, barely above a whisper. It's real, Robert replied, his voice hollow. And before you ask, no, I'm not calling the cops. He made it clear this was just a down payment on what's coming if I try. He's bluffing, Riley said, her voice rising in pitch. No, he's not, Robert sighed. The police came by already. I told them I got hit by a car. I'm not taking that chance. The next day, Riley walked into Robert's hospital room, her face pale with panic. Robert, I'm ruined. Drove around for hours, afraid to go home. When I finally did, the locks were changed. Bank accounts emptied, credit cards frozen. I've got nothing. You have to help me. Her voice cracked. Robert's gaze was cold. No. No to what? She asked, her voice breaking. No to everything, he said, his eyes locked on hers. If I use company resources to help you, Larry's coming for me again. I'm not that stupid. His gaze hardened. You're fired, Riley. 4 weeks severance. Leave by today. He glanced at her, unmoved. If you see him, tell him I'm out. Larry has taken everything from me. No money, no job. And without you on my side, I'm left with nothing but the ground beneath me. I'm sorry, Riley. You didn't see the look in your husband's eyes when he turned on me. I'm doing what I must to survive. Pathetic. That's all you've ever been. Just yesterday you were parading around like some alpha male puffed up with pride. But look at you now, shaking like a leaf, terrified that my husband, a man with 10 times your strength and resolve, might be hiding in the shadows. How did I ever let myself believe you were an upgrade? It's laughable that you thought I'd take you seriously, knowing full well you're a liar and a coward. Riley Garcia sat motionless in her car, fingers curling tightly around her phone. Parked on the side of the road, she stared at the blank screen. Her credit cards had been declined, her cash was gone, and she'd soon be out of gas too. Oddly, I hadn't cut off her phone. Maybe it was an oversight, or maybe I'd left it on for one final twist of the knife. She'd been driving toward the city, hoping to find refuge with her children. They'd always answered her texts within minutes. But today? Silence. She'd been trying to reach them since 10 a.m., and by now, she'd checked for messages so many times that it felt like a ritual. Still nothing. With a sigh of resignation, she reached for her purse, as empty as everything else in her life, and stepped out of the car. Smoothing the wrinkles from her skirt, she glanced up and down the quiet road. Then she raised her thumb, hoping for mercy from a passing stranger. That's when I pulled up in my old van, the paint chipped and the engine growling like a caged beast. I'd seen her the moment she'd stepped out of her car, A lone woman stranded on the roadside. I've never claimed to be an alpha. That's for men desperate to prove something. Real predators don't need to prove a thing. They hunt alone. I brought the van to a stop, and when she saw me, her eyes went wide with panic. Her body tensed, ready to flee, but fear rooted her in place. She'd seen it too late, the truth of what's in my eyes. I got out slowly, every step deliberate. "Get in," I said, my voice calm, measured. "We need to talk." She hesitated but did as she was told. No words, no resistance. She slid into the passenger seat and I followed, closing the door with a weighty finality. I didn't waste time. "Here's how it's going to go," I said, my eyes locked on hers. "You're going to file for divorce. No alimony, no claim to my property. What's mine stays mine. What's yours stays yours." I glanced at her sideways, watching her reaction. Her face was stone, but her eyes darted, searching for an exit. "Every piece of jewelry I've ever bought you, you'll return it. Write whatever reason you want for the divorce. Infidelity, irreconcilable differences. I don't care. Just get it done. Once it's final, you're gone from this town. No visits, no returns. You're done here." Her breath hitched, but she stayed silent. Her eyes were fixed on the dashboard like it held the answers to all her problems. I'd seen that look before. Hope fighting against certainty. "You'll still get to see the kids," I added, knowing this part would cut deepest. "But only if they want to see you, and only when I'm not around." I let the weight of that statement linger before dealing the final blow. "Your things will be packed and ready for you at the house. Be there by 10 a.m. tomorrow to collect them. If you're even a minute past 11 a.m., I'll burn it all. Am I clear?" Her lips pressed into a tight line. Slowly, she nodded, her gaze never leaving the dashboard. "When do I get the papers?" I asked. "A week," she muttered, her voice so faint it barely existed. "5 days," I replied. "I want them on my desk in 5 days. Understand?" Another nod. This time her eyes flickered toward me for just a moment, like she'd seen something she'd rather forget. I'd seen that look too, the look of someone who's realized too late what's been hunting them. Satisfied, I opened the door and gestured for her to get out. She did, and I drove away without so much as a glance in the rear view. By 10:30 a.m. the next morning, she'd already collected her things. 5 days later, the divorce papers were on my desk, right on time. Irreconcilable differences. That's what she'd written. I laughed when I saw it. Months passed, and freedom came with a signature and a stamp of approval from the court. It was done. Official. I'd like to say I felt relief, maybe even joy, but there was only stillness inside me. No anger, no peace, just the quiet. I'd wanted to believe Riley could be loyal, that she'd understand what it means to stand by someone through fire and flood. She never did. To her, I'd always be the man with worn-out clothes and unpolished shoes. She'd never grasped that you don't challenge a man like me, not a man who's 6'5" and refuses to bow. You don't threaten a man like that unless you're ready for what's coming. If she'd chosen to talk to me instead of trying to play the power game, maybe it could have ended differently. But once the line's been crossed, there's no walking it back. So now, I'll live on my terms, alone, if that's what it takes. Maybe I'll die alone too. That's the way it is for apex predators. No pack, no tribe, just one hunter walking the edge of the world. And that's fine by me. This concludes the story. If you like it, then put your powerful like and subscribe to the channel.